Hi, I wanted to make a book from scratch. I've always been interested in bookbinding, and here was my attempt at it. I used an A3 sketch pad. I had plenty of them lying around. You could use any paper you wanted, even regular old printer paper. What I was going to do with these A3 pages was cut them in half, and then once they're folded over, it'll make an A5 size journal. So I wanted to decorate the pages, and what I used was some acrylic paints, and I really watered it down to make bright colourful washes for purple, dark blue, light blue and green. I was going to use them to create a splatter effect on the paper to decorate it. Really easy, and I'm glad it was a nice sunny day so I could work outside and keep mess to a minimum. Make sure you get your brush good and soaking, full of colour. That way when you flick it down on the paper, you've got that nice splatter effect. And rinse thoroughly between colours so you don't muddy it up. You can splatter as much or as little as you want. It's really up to you. You could even just have plain pages in your book if you wanted to. I used a total of 12 pages out of the sketch pad, and 4 of them I kept blank and 8 of them I splattered with different colours. Here they're nice and dry, and now I'm ready to splatter on the other side. And of course, once they're splattered, you have to wait till they dry again before you can move on to the next stage. Right, next stage. This is when I'm going to cut the pages in half. I don't have a fancy guillotine. What I do have is an old cutting board, which I've marked with tape where the halfway mark is. I've got a quilting ruler that I'm going to use, and as you can see, I've got all my measurements right, and the thing I'm going to cut with is an old rotary cutter. Now the rotary cutter that I do have was one that I used to use for quilting. See, it's just a little one, but it's getting a bit blunt for fabric now. It's still dead sharp on paper, and it's going to do the job nice and smooth. Craft knives, I find sometimes if they're getting a little blunt, will catch and snag the paper. We didn't want that. So you can see how I'm going to measure up with the ruler and the cutter to cut the pages. So a few pages at a time. I'm going to cut them in half and stack them up ready for the next step. Very carefully trying to get them all lined up. Nice shot of my Cabbage Patch Kid arms. Lined up everywhere I need. Pin it in place. Get that ruler lined up with the marks on the board. See, the taper makes it so much easier to find at a glance the right measurement rather than looking for a fine line on the board. Make life easy for yourself sometimes. And I took my time with the cutting, because as soon as I try to go fast, that's when I start going a bit wonky. But definitely take your time. Do it right. Now this is to make the signatures for the book, and I'll explain more about that in a second. This thing here I actually found in our garage when we bought our house. Now I had no idea what it was, but I was just starting to get an interest in bookbinding at that point, and it looked remarkably like a press of some sort. So I decided to put it into service as a book press. As you can see, it's pretty rusted and it's kind of old and rough looking around the edges, so I've put some clear paper down both below and above my pages. So they're a little bit crinkled from the liquid that's been on them. I just want to press them nice and flat, but the clean sheets of paper are going to keep them clean, that no dust and dirt and stuff is going to get them. And the book's just going to add to the pressure to flatten them out. I did a little research online trying to find out more about this press. What was it? Where is it from? You know, how old it was. And the closest information that I could find was that that particular company makes vice presses for pressing bow ties in the Victorian era. So this thing is an antique. I don't know if it was for double the amount of bow ties or for something bigger like linen or what have you, but it's doing the job really well as a book press. Okay, so I left those pages to press overnight, and as you'll see in a minute, they come out really nice and flat. I had to use a plastic glove on my hand when I was taking the bolts off again, because I found when I was putting it on, my hands got covered in the orange rust and I didn't want to mark all my new pages. So gloves it was. See how flat they are. Works beautifully. And now I'm going to line them up and use the groove on the table and the plastic palette knife to mark a groove or a crease down the center line of these pages. It just makes it easier to get a nice crisp fold when you're folding the signatures. What a signature is a bundle of pages that are bound together in a book, and then you bind together several signatures to create the book. If you see any hardcover books, you look at the top of the spine and you'll see these little groups of pages. Those are called signatures. And this is what I'm creating. Now for this particular book, I'm creating 8 signatures, and in each of those 8 signatures I've got the 3 sheets of paper. So when you fold it up, it creates 12 pages, I think, you know, front and back. And it's not really in shot here, but it's folded over nice and straight. Now this, make sure your fold goes where you want it, doesn't go off wonky or skew off. And I'm just going to go do the same to the rest of the pile. And here they all are. Just have a quick flick through to make sure they're all separated. And then running over the spine of the fold again, just to make sure it's nice and crisp. And I'll do that to all 8 of the signatures. Now when you're making signatures in a book, you can have as many or as few pages as you want, and as many signatures as you want. Now this is where I'm starting to get a little technical. I've made a little strip which is about the same size as the length of the pages to work out where to poke the holes in the spines of these signatures in order to bind them. And as you can see, there's 3 horizontal lines on the strip, because at this point I'm still thinking I'm going to try the simple long stitch method. Now to poke the holes, I was looking at this awl, homemade awl that we got in the garage, but the tip's a bit blunt. I also found this very large darning needle, and that's a nice sharp tip. So that's the one I ended up choosing, because it's going to be much easier to poke the holes through the paper. I'm trying to use the ruler to keep my line straight when I mark the spines of the signatures. I'm just drawing a line up the edge of them, just so there's a little spot to tell me where to poke the holes. Just using a regular ballpoint pen, but you could use a marker or a pencil, whatever you have on hand. Although I think a crayon would probably be somewhat less accurate. And just double checking that all of them have got their marks on them. Now that's an example of simple long stitch binding, but this is what I'd changed my mind, decided to go for, kettle stitch binding. So as you can see, I've added on some more lines to mark, and now I'm poking the holes in the correct places. And I've got 5 holes now that I'm marking out. The needle just went through quite easily, which was quite good. And having a styrofoam board is very handy for stabbing holes in things. And there they all are, ready to go.